A very good morning to one and all present here. Our topic, Pinny ma'am and mine, is of judicial review to comedians, a judicial response to comedians, and whether comedy or stand-up comedy, is it comedy or slander? So the research methodology that we have adopted for this research paper is that we've used the doctrinal method and we have analyzed secondary data like legislations, reports, articles, and authoritative materials on the subject. And on the basis of that, we have tried to assess the data. Our research problem is are stand-up comedians violating Article 19 and the Indian Penal Code through an analysis of judicial trends. So, what is stand up comedy? Stand up comedy is basically a solo performance. It can be performed in a cafe, comedy club, or bar. But today, in the digital era of Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, we see these forums also being used for stand up comedy. But when we talk about stand up comedy, which is a platform to make jokes, satire is a very important form of stand up comedy, which is basically a method of criticizing either people, concepts, beliefs, opinions, legislations, and sometimes those analogies or criticisms can also be on, established institutions in society like marriage, religion, etc. So, satire is a very old form of comedy. It was present actually through the second century BC and it has been recorded as a written form. So, in its written form, it was actually a criticism of a legislation itself. So, even in its first form, the first known satire is of a legislation itself. So, it is primarily has always been questioning the government. It not really questioning, but it makes us think about the government, maybe through some form of comedy or jokes, etc., or some kind of statements which are made. So, as I said, through these forms of Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, stand-up comedy has become more potently available to every strata and every generation of society. Now, due to the fact that there are a vast range of topics which are covered and may be covered by different type of artists in their forms of comedy, there has been a question that has been brought up that should there be a code of conduct for stand-up comedians and for their profession. And to this I would like to say that this would not be a good idea, because the whole idea of stand-up comedy is to make us think through a very a humorous manner by putting forth things in a humorous manner. So this idea of putting forward a code of conduct on them would really diminish their profession and then brings the question of the right to profession that we all enjoy as a fundamental right under the constitution. So this is one debate that which we wanted to bring forward in our research paper also, that should it be there or not, and we believe that a code of conduct should not be there. However, if we look at the two pictures that I have put forward in my PPT, one is of Kunal Kamra and one is of Veer Das. So Veer Das is known for his Two Indias Act, famous and infamous for his Two Indias Act at the Kennedy Center. And one of the most controversial statements that he made was, "I come from an India where we worship women in day and gang rape them in night." Now, again, this is the typical statements coming from an artist who wants us to think, and it has some kind of dark humor that may be attached to it. But then there can be so many interpretations of the same statement, and this is primarily why one feels that Vedas came under a lot of criticism for the statements he made in his analogy. But I think, as researchers, me and my co-author believe that these are analogies and this is the true form of satire. And if we inhibit this through maybe constitutional restrictions or creation of a code, we may take away from a very important unit which makes us think. I think satire and comedy makes us think without really creating an aura of pressure to think about these important matters. So, in a very humorous manner, it does address a lot of questions. At the same time, I have also put up the picture of Kunal Kamra. who is infamous for his tweets on the Supreme Court, where he said the Supreme Court is the supreme joke of the country. He has also, put up pictures where there was an orange colored, which was wrapped around the Supreme Court flag, which was considered offensive. And this is where I think we as researchers would like to point forward that this is a difficult topic to address, where Kunal Kamra has crossed certain lines of decency when he addresses or sort of misbehaves through his profession as a stand-up comedian by making these tweets, or even his form of satire can cross some kind of boundaries when he makes those jokes. So yes, there are two angles to it. There are two sides to it. Vedas's example shows a very positive aspect where we are made to think, whereas Kunal Kamra's does give a little bit of a negative setback of providing free speech to them, because it was derogatory to the Supreme Court. It did cross lines. So these are a few of the provisions. Article 19 is what we were primarily dealing with. So Article 19(1)(a) provides us for the right to free speech, and I have quoted that one of the case laws provides that cutting of jokes on political leaders will not attract any offence in view of Article 19(1)(a) of the Constitution of India, as it enshrines freedom of speech and expression. The applicants are artists who cut jokes to make laughter and entertainment of the general public, and they have no intention to hurt religious feelings of any person of the society. And this is the case of Dharmendra Yadav versus State of Madhya Pradesh, which I have quoted and is present in my research paper also. So here the Supreme Court itself also tries to support the stand-up comedians by making a statement that they are allowed through their profession to make statements, and it does not lead to the presumption that that there is some kind of derogation to religion or a political party that is implied. I have also provided a couple of the provisions under the IPC which may have been used or charged against stand-up comedians. All of them use the term deliberate, malicious, or wantonly, which means that a clear mens rea must be there in the person to actually want to hurt religious beliefs, which is which is potent here. That may not be predominantly the hope of the stand-up comedian. He does not want to, or she does not want to hurt religious feelings, but may be wanting to bring in potent questions which today's generation needs to ask. So the primary point of putting across these provisions was to ensure that we realize that it has to be a deliberate and a malicious act. And can we confirm that stand-up comedians are doing it out of some kind of deliberateness and maliciousness? I don't think we can concern of the same in majority of the cases. The next point, and the 2 points that I would like to also put forward, is that is the judiciary, through the criminal contempt provisions that it has, especially in the Kunal Kamra case and multiple cases where they felt there has been a misuse of freedom of speech, is it overextending its powers, and is this judicial overreach where it tries to limit these people and what they want to say? Especially, one has to take into consideration that Kunal Kamra's statement questioned the Supreme Court's unbiasedness. And is the Supreme Court free from scrutiny, as free citizens aren't to be having the freedom to question whether they are biased or unbiased? So these are debates which are necessary. A majoritarian attitude is also seen in the response that is there towards the stand-up comedians. There is a lot of upheaval when there are certain communal statements made, and then we see also a lot of judicial action in predominantly those form of statements when they are made. So is there a rise in intolerance is another analogy we want to put forward. Lastly, to conclude, I would like to say is the right of professions of the profession of stand-up comedians being affected. And as there has been an argument that the right to freedom of speech and expression is not free from restrictions, the putting of restrictions affects the profession of comedy. I just conclude with my last 3 points, if I'm permitted. Can I conclude, please?
Yes, please conclude. But actually, I'm not allowed to let you exceed more than 2 minutes than the delegated time. So please
Okay.
keep that in
Okay,
mind.
I'm just quickly finishing. So I was also wanting to point out the right to dissent. Is the right to dissent being going to be hampered if we restrict stand-up comedians? And lastly, I would end with the quote from which was mentioned in a judgment, Ashutosh Dubey versus Netflix. A stand-up comedian is known to highlight a particular point and exaggerate the same to the extent that it becomes satire and a comedy. People do not view the comments or jokes made by them as a statement of truth and take them with a pinch of salt. With this, I conclude my presentation. These are the references and some of the links that we have referred to. Thank you.
Vishalakshi,
Yes, ma'am.
first of all, congratulations to you because it's very important topic in today's society and you have presented this in a very out of the box way. But
Thank you.
my question is, don't you think artists which are role model to younger generations, they have certain responsibilities? What kind of language they are using, even on the name of satire or comedy?
Ma'am, you raised a very important question. When I talk, that's why I gave the example of Kunal Kamra and Veer Das. Kunal Kamra did become very, very derogatory. In fact, after the Supreme Court tweets that he made another set of statements which used bad words. So, as I said, that this is where some kind of correction must come in. Stand-up comedians also need to know that they are still citizens of India and they need to comply by the basic moral code which the society is covered by. So that is where Kunal Kamra had crossed lines and has to be addressed. But we cannot, use the same yardstick for such a plethora of, stand-up comedians. There are so many of us, and there are so many stand-up comedians. We cannot just say ki Kunal Kamra because that particular incident was so exaggerated. All stand-up comedians are, should be limited in the way they speak. I don't think all of them speak the same way.
Vishalakshi,
But
my
do you,
question to you
yeah,
is, I'm sorry, please
Yes,
continue.
yes, yes, ma'am.
please, sir, go on.
So my question to you was, it's not a question, it's just an, don't you think that so many media platforms so easily available to the public at large nowadays? It has become very easy to express their whatever views, logical or illogical over the media. And whether the problem can be addressed by not controlling the, not by not focusing upon the control on the artists, but focusing upon the control on this media. Don't you think so?
Very true, sir. Very true. I think also the media, whether it is the metaverse, the Facebook, the YouTube, Instagram, these have become places of open forum, which is good, but have become unrestricted forum, and then they also become vulnerable to immoral and unorthodox, maybe sometimes unacceptable forms of communication, which are taking place. But centering back to stand-up comedians, I think, sir, as I said, we go back 2200 years, and it has been a method of keeping, I think, the government in check and keeping the citizens on their toes as to what we should know and should not know, or at least maybe in our mundane lives we do not really maybe give thought to some very, very important points which through humor these people do put forward and make us think about. And I think that is very, very necessary in the current climate.
Appreciate. But and so therefore, I think the vicarious liability of the platforms
Definitely must
should
be.
also be primary focus because they are the very means through which if something is wrong and that is being propagated. So recently, there was a series which was curtailed by Delhi High Court in March, some college life or something, because that contains a lot of explicit material, and the court had to come down and all that.
Right. So there is that balance has to come in, which when with these OTT platforms, there are so many untouched topics which are being brought forth, but at the same time, the aspect of immorality is there, which has to be brought into check. But
Yeah.
it can't be too blanket to take away from the creativity of the platform or of the person.
It's quite debatable,
It's
creativity
another thing.
versus.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but ma'am, on the name of creativity, we can't put anything on this social.
Very true, ma'am. I agree. I agree, ma'am. If it has
We have
crossed
to put certain
boundaries,
restrictions.
yes, ma'am. Certain restrictions should be there, but maybe an appreciation that there is free speech and it exists must be more potently appreciated by the government also.
I would, suggest to read that Order of Justice Swarnakanta Sharma of
Sure, I'll do that.
that has come just in March, and she has explained as to what should be there in the contents and why it has to be corrected. Let us move
Thank you.
forward.
For more such videos, subscribe to Center for Legal Research and Studies and press the bell icon.